All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Reinforce 2025. Hopefully you're having a great day. We'd like to keep it that way. This is a session we've been doing quite often. TDR 301, Innovations in AWS Detection and Response for Integrated Security Outcomes. My name is Himanshu Verma. I lead the team of our worldwide security, identity, and governance specialists. We help customers with their security outcomes. So this is a very relevant session. And I'm joined with
Ryan Holland. I run the GuardDuty team.
In this session, we will focus on all the key innovations that are happening in the detection and response domain. So we'll provide you a quick overview of our AWS detection and response services. We will go through some of the new key features, including the ones that you heard in the keynote today. And we'll also actually show you an interactive demo of these features. One of the key themes, as you have heard from the keynote, was simplifying security outcomes. So these services are actually moving into that direction to help our customers come to their security outcomes easily, faster, in a shorter time frame, and then provide a better user experience. I'd also like to share how did we get here. AWS has had quite a breadth and depth of security portfolio, not just around the detection and response domain, but overall in general as well. But when we asked customers what are some of the key pain points or areas that they would like to focus on these are some of the key themes that originated. The first one was around being able to get visibility across all these service primitives in one easy way. We recognize that when there's fragmented visibility, security teams often spend a lot of time and invest a lot of time in gathering the key insights before they can take actions. Another key aspect is around context. Each customer's environment is different. Each customer's AWS policies and or accounts are configured differently. So being able to provide rich context in the findings is very important. That's an area where we wanted to enhance things like investing in machine learning models or artificial intelligence and leverage that to learn from how customers are leveraging AWS resources, and then accordingly, how can the security services act to provide more rich context and value back. We've also learned that workflows as well as taking actions is very important for the security teams, whether it's during the development processes itself and or downstream during incident response and security operations. So having signals that can ease the workflow and automation is key for our customers. That is another key area that we continuously were getting asked from customers to provide more signals and telemetry that can automate and help them remediate and respond by creating workflows. And then finally, we wanted to surface what are some of the highly critical incidents and or tasks where customers can prioritize the actions. As you know, one of the key pain areas with a lot of the detection and response tools can be signal to noise ratio. So when we got feedback from customers, they wanted some rich signals associated with making sure that the response elements and the mean time to response can be shrunk or can be reduced in time. With that, all of these services that we will share today are focused on unlocking the business outcomes, helping the security teams to enable the business teams so that they can go ahead and innovate and or adopt new services as well as workloads in the cloud. First and foremost, we are focused on making sure that customers can protect their AWS workloads, whether they are compute, containers, serverless. We want to make sure that we are providing those native capabilities that help you protect those workloads. Additionally, security teams often need one place to glue all the things together and have a centralized monitoring dashboard. Unification of these signals and unification of these detections and or events from this domain is a key part of what we want the security teams to drive that outcome for. Additionally, we do recognize that there are multiple different skills in the security team. as well as multiple personas. There are teams who are often responding to events, but there are teams who would like to further dig down into the root cause of an incident and investigate why it happened so that they can accordingly then tweak and or apply the right preventative controls. And then ultimately, we want to help customers unlock security innovation across their AWS environment. So with that, our portfolio consists of 3 key themes or pillars. The first one is threat detection and workload protection. This is where we are helping customers protect their workloads by leveraging AWS's threat intelligence, as well as automation using machine learning and artificial intelligence built in, whether it's, like I said, workloads across compute or containers or serverless, or databases or storage. We want to make sure that there is threat detection and workload protection available for our customers. The second is vulnerability management. And these vulnerabilities could either be vulnerabilities in software, in operating system, or when you're writing lines of code where you're calling either libraries or software packages. And more importantly, could be vulnerabilities around sensitivity associated with sensitive data or risks. So we want to make sure that you have full visibility into the vulnerabilities. And then the third pillar is risk management. How to associate all these findings and signals and then tie them to a resource that provides you the proper risk approach of then not only identifying and evaluating the risk across your AWS organization or accounts, but also down to the resource level, and then prioritizing the associated actions that need to be taken. So across these 3 pillars, there are several key innovations and new features. We will dive into our threat detection pillar next, and I'll hand it over to Ryan to cover threat detection as well as vulnerability management.
Perfect. Thank you, Himanshu. So yeah, as Himanshu mentioned, the first topic we'll cover is threat detection, which is Amazon GuardDuty. So if you're not familiar with GuardDuty, it's a managed threat detection service that uses a variety of techniques, including machine learning, threat intelligence, profile-based learning, in order to identify either malicious or suspicious events that are taking place inside of your account, but also looking at the activity of those workloads as well. So we look at a whole host of different data sources that I'll go through here in a minute to get that understanding of what is normal for your account or for your workload, and to raise actionable alerts when there's something that deviates from that or something that matches a pattern of no malicious activity. GuardDuty is one of our most widely adopted security services, tens of thousands of customers, millions of accounts that are under monitoring, and over 95% of the top 2,000 AWS customers use GuardDuty today. And some of the reasons why they do that is it really helps detect the suspicious or malicious activity that takes place inside their workloads, including the newer generative AI workloads as well. We help analysts come to an investigation and automate response a lot easier by giving them a lot of actionable content around the findings, including a host of metadata that we decorate the events with as well. We have some part of our service that can help with preventing ransomware through virus scanning of EBS volumes as well as S3 objects. And we centralize that across all of the accounts within the AWS organization. So leveraging our delegated administrator feature in AWS organizations, you can delegate a security admin within your org, which has the ability to set the policy, define which protection plans you want enabled, define things like custom threat intelligence if you want to add that, and have this apply universally across your entire organization without having to allow individual account owners the ability to modify any of those security settings. We also have a lot of customers that use GuardDuty to help fulfill certain compliance regulations like PCI DSS. So how does this all work? So I think one of the most important parts to start this is how we get access to the data that we leverage. So a lot of the data that we leverage is in the form of logs. So we have this broken up in 2 different categories, what we call foundational data sources, and these are enabled for everyone who turns GuardDuty on. And these include VPC flow logs, DNS, Route 53 DNS query logs, as well as CloudTrail. And one of the most important things to keep in mind is you do not have to enable any of these data sources. You don't have to turn them on or configure them. Now, obviously, I would hope everyone probably does have CloudTrail turned on, but most customers don't turn on or collect flow logs. It can be kind of costly, and it's also can be difficult to get value out of if you don't have a lot of the downstream systems that we offer. So we access all of these data flows from the backend service themselves. This has a lot of benefits from a configure and management and configurability standpoint in that you don't have to go to each individual account and make sure that you've turned these log sources on. It also has some security value because it means no one can interrupt our access to that. So if an attacker got privileged access to one of your accounts, they can't inhibit our ability to get access to CloudTrail or flow logs, for example. And then we have a host of what we call workload protection services. These are add-ons that customers can configure either across an entire organization or on an account-by-account level that meets your needs. And I'll go through each of these here in a minute. But regardless of which data source we're using, we then go into the security analytics where we do the really interesting stuff with this data to try to identify threats. We use a host of different systems as well as technologies in order to identify either malicious or anomalous behavior. So we have a host of rules that are kind of static. They're looking for things that are single event matches, things like threat intelligence. And the threat intelligence that we provide comes native with the service. We offer threat intelligence that we license from third parties, but we also have a growing and very large and very impactful set of threat intelligence that comes from AWS itself. So there was an announcement earlier today about the Amazon Active Defense and the threat intelligence that they generate out of things like MadPot. We have been offering that through GuardDuty for some time now. So any of the findings that come from GuardDuty that are sourced from there will be tagged with Amazon Active Defense as well, so you understand where that source came from. But we also have other sources of threat intelligence that we generate internal to Amazon or to AWS. And our way of externalizing that to our customers is through GuardDuty. And this, again, comes automatically whenever you have the service on. We also have a host of machine learning detections. These are ML models that are generally looking for anomalous behavior. And we do this across multiple different data sources, so CloudTrail, EKS audit logs, S3 data plane events. All of these have machine learning models that are very specific to those data sources, and they're trained based on the activity of users in your account as well as other accounts within your AWS organization, and compared against the baseline that we build in order to identify possibly malicious but significantly anomalous behavior that's taking place. When we generate a finding, we don't just send the alert, we also go and gather a set of metadata that helps decorate that and makes it it makes it more actionable by adding things like the tags and, for instances, the ENI information. Same for container-based findings. We'll give you all the container names, the task IDs, a lot of the metadata that would come from those associated services in order to make it very easy to respond to that particular finding. And then all of these findings are sent out EventBridge, so you can trigger automation on the back end, but we also send it to Security Hub, and we'll hear more about the new Security Hub here later in the presentation, where you can consolidate the findings along with other data sources like Inspector. And then one other thing I'll just call out is the malware protection. So we have malware protection that works in two different ways. One of them that is triggered based on a finding. So for EBS volume scanning, if you have a finding, so if GuardDuty detects activity within your environment, like connecting to a command and control server or connecting to a Bitcoin mining pool, things that are indicative of the possibility of an infection on the instance, you can trigger an automated scan of the underlying EBS volumes. We do this offline, so it doesn't impact your workload. There's no agents involved. It's completely offline through an EBS snapshot. And we'll scan the full volume and then send you findings that tell you whether or not there was any malware detected. So now I just want to talk briefly about the different workload protection plans that you have the option to enable. So the first one is S3 protection. So this turns on S3 data plane events. So in CloudTrail, we have management events, and there's also data events for things like S3, which are things like your list, puts, get object calls. And these are very voluminous, and a lot of times customers don't have these enabled. Again, we get access to these from the back end, so you don't have to enable them yourself in S3. And we build up profiles and start looking for anomalous activity. So is there a principal that's suddenly downloading large numbers of objects from a bucket they don't generally access, for example? So looking for data exfiltration or data destruction attacks against S3. On EKS protection, we're looking at the EKS audit log. So if you think about Kubernetes, you have a control plane. It has an audit log feature, which is essentially like the CloudTrail of Kubernetes in this case. And again, you don't have to turn these on. We'll get them directly from the EKS backplane. And we're looking for things like changes to the configuration that could make it susceptible to compromise, like allowing public access to your admin portal, or unusual or anomalous new privileged containers being launched, or changes to the authentication flow that could indicate a possible compromise of an identity. And then we have RDS protection, which is looking at the login events in your RDS databases, looking for anomalous activity. So either logins that are suspicious and anomalous, or brute force attacks against your database as well. With Lambda protection, we're looking at flow logs for your container-based workloads running in Lambda. And then lastly, one of the newer ones that we have is our runtime monitoring. So runtime monitoring has been an evolution over the last 2 years. We support now all of the compute types from EC2, ECS with Fargate, ECS with EC2, and as well as EKS. So we have a runtime monitoring solution that leverages an eBPF-based sensor that runs on the workload. We manage it completely for you. So we will deploy this, depending on the workload type, we'll have different methods of deploying the sensor for you. For EKS, which is really relevant because we're going to talk more about that with our extended threat detection, we will add a managed add-on to all of your EKS clusters. So from an administrator standpoint, you don't have to go and find all of your clusters or go and make sure someone makes a change to their configuration. If you enable the automatic management, which you can do from the delegated admin, we will go find every relevant EKS cluster and apply this managed add-on so you get this runtime telemetry. And the outputs of all of those will go into those different processors that I just talked about, but then we also wanted to add something we called extended threat detection that allows us to look and use the benefit of hindsight as well as looking across those different data sources to identify really high confidence findings or attacks that we can raise with a new finding type that we launched at reInvent last year, which is we called extended threat detection or attack sequences. And in order to build these, we're correlating multiple different signals, either across different data sources. So initially, we looked at CloudTrail and S3 data plane events, or just multiple events within a single data source, where maybe they generated multiple different findings that could be indicative of the progression of an attack. But we also, when we do this hindsight evaluation, we look at things that we didn't generate findings for. So other signals and other attributes that we know about that piece of data that maybe didn't reach the threshold to generate a finding by itself, or is other pieces of information that we know about the source IP address. For example, is it a VPN provider that we've recently seen a lot of threat activity from? So other kind of attributes that we can then apply to the content and other findings that we've generated to say, at this point, we now believe that this isn't just something that's slightly anomalous or worthy of an individual finding, but we're going to correlate all these together and give you an attack sequence finding that will show you the progression from start to finish of the attack, map everything to the MITRE attack framework, including techniques and tactics, and show you a timeline of where this attack began and where the last event that we saw was. At reInvent last year, we launched the first two of these findings, compromised identity and compromised data. The compromised identity attack sequence leverages CloudTrail. So basically, that was available for all customers who use GuardDuty. There's no additional cost for these findings. It's just in part of this service. If customers had the S3 protection, so we could see the data plane events, we were then able to start correlating CloudTrail management event activity as well as activity on the S3 data plane. And based on the model, if we had a finding where there was a large number of the impacted resources were in S3, we would generate a specific one called compromised data. And then today, at our keynote, we launched the compromised cluster finding, which looks at all of these data sources. So those first two, we still look at CloudTrail activity, S3 activity if it's present, but now we also add EKS audit logs as well as EKS runtime telemetry to identify where there's been a compromise of a workload on an EKS cluster and give you a finding for that. So with that, I'll show you a quick demo of what these findings look like. So the first thing that you'll notice is, I'll just call out, whenever we launch a new feature, there's usually a big bubble on the top of the console. One other thing I would also like to remind everyone is we do have a GuardDuty announcements SNS topic, so if you haven't subscribed to that, it might be good to do, because that way we'll push all of these announcements to you as well. So on our summary page, you'll see a couple things. First, we have the new findings that we've seen in this period. I have it set for 7 days. And one thing you'll notice that's new with these attack sequences is we gave them a severity of critical. So previous to the launch of these attack sequence findings, we had high was our highest severity. We did launch these new ones as critical. We believe them to be very critical, and we recommend that they drive immediate action. If I click on these, I can go and now see either just all my findings, or I can say I just want to see attack sequence findings only. And if I look at this one here, so this is one of the new ones from the recently launched feature for EKS. And you'll see it says it's a possible compromise of this open search. And we'll list in a very human-readable explanation why we came to this conclusion. So it's a sequence of 13 different signals or different pieces of information that we correlated together. And we give you the start and the stop time, and then the tactics and techniques that were observed as part of this attack, as well as some of the most important indicators that led us to believe that this was likely a compromise. So in this case, you could see that there was connections to crypto mining IP addresses, DNS queries to crypto mining pools, and then we also, on the runtime, we detected the execution of a mining process as well as malware on the instance as well. So again, the idea is that very first top-line summary, if you're an incident responder or if you're a security operations center, it should give you all the information you need to know where you need to start your investigation and kind of to help understand the context and the why you were getting this finding. On the overview, we'll give you the attack sequence information, which will show you the MITRE tactics mapped, as well as the different timelines of how these came to be. And then you can also go and see all of the resources that were involved. In this case, it involves a Kubernetes workload that we're running on an EKS cluster. But it could, on other types findings I'll show you, it could span multiple different resources. So in this case, this was one of the S3 ones that we launched at reInvent last year. And again, you get this very rich, human-readable, easy-to-understand summary that explains what the attack was and what the most important parts about it were. So we saw some multiple user agents that we know are generally associated with suspicious activity. We saw sensitive APIs that were unusual for this particular user. And we saw activity that indicated data exfiltration. So again, if I look at these timelines, we'll map again these to the MITRE tactics and techniques, and you can see the different resources. So there was a credential involved. It came from an EKS cluster that was running one of our test scripts, and it accessed 2 different buckets in order to do data destruction and data exfiltration. So with that, I will now want to move into the second pillar, which is vulnerability management, and some of the newer and exciting features we have in Amazon Inspector. So if you're not familiar with Amazon Inspector, it's a fully automated vulnerability management system that spans multiple different types of resources within AWS. And it's cloud native, it's designed for cloud workloads. It supports EC2 instances as well as ECR repos to scan your container images, Lambda functions, and doing code scanning for that as well. And then recently, one of the launches we had today that we'll talk about some more is code repositories as well, and actually scanning source code. So some of the key features of Inspector, right? So it allows you to detect not only software vulnerabilities, but also reachability vulnerabilities. So whether or not an instance is reachable from the public internet and on what ports it's reachable on. So this will help you understand, and this is very important when we start looking at severities for different vulnerabilities, because if an instance is vulnerable and internet reachable, we will help prioritize that higher. And we do that through something called an inspector score. It takes into consideration the CVSS score, but also other attributes that we know, such as, is there an active exploit that we see being used in the wild, or is it reachable from the internet? We also try to help customers shift left. Like the best way to remediate a vulnerability is to do so before it's reached production. And we'll talk a little more how we do that here in a second. So that first shift to the left, right? Rather than running a vulnerability scanner against all of your running resources to find your vulnerabilities, it's ideal if you don't push vulnerable software to production at all. So you can proactively scan your deployments for vulnerabilities using our API within your CI/CD pipeline. So we have multiple integrations for CI/CD tools that allow you to scan, understand the vulnerability results, and if you like, block those builds before they can reach your production workloads. Again, on EC2, we leverage Systems Manager, which is a great tool for both patching your systems that are already running, but also it allows us to gather the information in a continuous fashion about what software is running on those instances. For customers that don't have SSM installed, we do have agent support as well. So you don't have to have an agent, we just can get a little bit quicker information if you do. And then for Lambda code scans, and also for our code repository scanning, we're not just going to tell you you have a problem, we'll show you where in the code that problem exists, as well as a recommended remediation, and including a patch that you can just download and apply to your source code to perform the fix. And then one of the other key features that we just also recently launched just before the show was the mapping of running containers to vulnerabilities in container repos. So one of the challenges we saw was a lot of people had a lot of container images in their repos that would have a lot of vulnerabilities, but when you're trying to prioritize which ones to address, it's helpful to know which one of those container images are actually running right now, because those are the ones you're going to want to fix first. And then today, during the keynote, again, we did launch code security, which again looks for vulnerabilities in the source code on GitHub. So it allows you to connect to your code repository, scan that for vulnerabilities using static analysis, using software composition analysis to look for open source code, open source package that are used in your code as well. So I'll do a quick show walkthrough on that. So the first thing I'll show here is, I just mentioned, mapping the vulnerabilities from the container image to running vulnerabilities. So you can see here, I've got a very large number of container images in my ECR repo that have a large number of findings. But if I want to see which ones of these I actually am using right now, I can simply apply a filter that says, show me the ones that I'm using. So out of all of those, which granted, you probably do want to fix those at some point, but if I'm going to prioritize, the 3 that actually have something running against it are probably the most important one. So that OpenSearch cluster that I was showing you in the GuardDuty demo that we generated that attack sequence from, as you can see, is this the same cluster here, and lo and behold, it's got some very high severity vulnerabilities on it, which possibly could have led to how it was compromised in the first place. The second thing we want to show is the code security. So again, this is connecting to your code repository and scanning the source code in there. So I'll show you how you can configure this very easily by attaching it to your code repo and picking how often you want it to scan. If you want it to be enable periodic scanning or scan on trigger when there's pull requests or code pushes. And then you can choose which type of scanning. So there's 3 different options. So you can do static analysis, infrastructure as code scanning. So this is very useful if you check your infrastructure as code like Terraform or CloudFormation into code repos. We can scan it for best practices, as well as then, like I said, software composition analysis. So if I look at the findings that are generated from this, so again, it will show you exactly where in the code the vulnerability is. So you can see this is a Terraform stack. And in this Terraform, right now, it is going to create an overly permissive access to EKS cluster. So the EKS cluster will be accessible to the entire internet. So not only does it tell you where the vulnerability is, we give you an explanation as to why we found this to be problematic, as well as a patch file that you can download that will fix this for you, as well as the recommended change. We also look for things like hard-coded credentials. So if you hard-code credentials like access keys into your code, it'll flag that for you as well. And then obviously the recommendation there is to remove those. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Himanshu.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Moving on, we'll move to the third pillar, which is risk management, after we covered threat detection as well as vulnerability management, and you saw some of the key innovations. In this pillar, one of the services that we already have is AWS Security Hub. AWS Security Hub is our centralized tool, or has been our centralized tool, where we are aggregating all the findings from native AWS detection services, as well as from our partner tools. Originally, the service was designed for cloud security posture management and centralized monitoring. When I leverage the term cloud security posture management, what that means is that we have controls that we were evaluating in the service, and these controls were easily aggregated in the form of standards, which would include something like an AWS foundational security best practices, an internal standard that was available in the service, and also standards that customers were leveraging, which were industry standards, such as NIST cybersecurity standard or CIS benchmarks, foundational standards. And these controls will then evaluated against the policies or the configurations that customers had set. And wherever we would see drifts and or non-compliance to those best practices, we will generate a finding in Security Hub. And Security Hub also became a place where customers were aggregating these findings and then also orchestrating downstream automation as well as response and remediation. Based on the overwhelming feedback, we've today announced the preview of the new AWS security experience, which enhances that centralized monitoring and cloud security posture management to now a unified security experience. So this unified security experience brings in all the detections from the existing native AWS services, whether it's threats, vulnerabilities, or misconfigurations across controls, network exposures, and or sensitive data. But not only does it bring and aggregate these findings now, but it also does automated correlation. This correlation can then be driven in within the same console by customers from actionable to form actionable insights. You can drill down into some of the signals as well as identify what are the critical risks associated with the resources. We also go down and show you like what are the primary resources, what are associated, and then what are the other secondary resources that are also potentially exposed and or are exhibited across these findings. So Security Hub now becomes a place where easily customers can not only review the risks associated with controls, but they can actually correlate all the findings that are coming in. An example would be what Ryan's walking us through, where you saw there was a container image which had a potential vulnerability, a container image which had also a threat, and then if there is a misconfiguration associated with that image, we will all now correlate that in one unified view. We also wanted to make sure that these findings are not available in a proprietary format, but are available in an open standard format that customers can easily leverage and then take actions on for downstream automation. An industry standard that has been set where we actually already aggregate all the log information for our customers is called the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, or OCSF. That Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework is what we are now leveraging in the Security Hub service to normalize all these findings into that standard format. So from there, customers can not only easily get the right information, but they can take the appropriate actions. There are built-in integrations already in the preview, similar to what we had in the cloud security posture management version of the service, where you can either create downstream automated tickets using tools like Jira or ServiceNow, and we will continue to build on additional integrations. All the findings in that OCSF, or Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, can be streamed to your other third-party tools as well, such as if you're using a security incident event monitoring tool or a security orchestration tool, you can aggregate those findings there as well. So starting today, in your existing Security Hub console, you'll be able to pivot to this new experience, which will help unify the security operations across all of AWS's native detection services. In addition to unifying the findings, we will also provide you rich context, which will give you all the details around the resource that was impacted, also what all are the other resources and your protection coverage across the various accounts and the regions, and then bring in all the detections, vulnerabilities, and configuration findings, and correlate them in one place. One of the other new features that have been introduced is building upon the GuardDuty attack path, which is only relevant to threats, but to show an attack path now, which includes both security posture management or CSPM findings along with vulnerability findings as well. This helps now customers to now take streamlined response actions and define exactly where and what actions or remediations need to be taken, which is also a feature that has been built into each of these exposure findings. There are some new features and terms that are now evolving in this unified Security Hub console. First and foremost, you will be able to easily navigate to the new feature from your existing Security Hub console. If you're already using Security Hub and have activated it across your accounts, there will be an option to pivot to the unified experience. The service is available in preview, which means there's no associated cost or configuration. The same accounts will also leverage that feature. We've also made it very easy, if you don't have Security Hub today, to actually aggregate that across all your accounts, aggregate the findings across all your regions, and then easily enable them. In fact, all of our detection and response services are integrated with AWS organizations, which makes it easier for customers to delegate a centralized management account and then enable the services from there and manage them from one centralized security account as well. Some of the things that you'll see in the new service are things like exposure findings, which is where the correlation happens. So imagine where you have an EC2 instance that is exhibiting a vulnerability, and that vulnerability has now been exposed, which has led to a threat. And then the reason that the vulnerability happened is because of a misconfiguration. Those will all be correlated in the exposure findings, which you'll be able to easily navigate to. Additionally, since Inspector is leveraging functionality to show you whether a resource is reachable out to the network, what's also important is what path it's using to reach to the network. And then that correlation tied in with what was the attack path that was used is what will be available in a visual graph in the attack path interface of the service. We also provide full resource coverage and account coverage view in the service now. So not only can you see the resources which are exhibiting risk or have potential exposures, but you can actually go in and look at all the resources that are associated potentially to a finding or to exposures. And then we want to make sure that it's easier and simple for customers to actually take downstream response and remediation actions. And this is something where the triage as well as alerting features are built into the service. So you will have options to either create a ticket, we will reflect the ticket number with the integrated services and toolings that we have today, and then additionally you will have the option to also integrate it with other tools as well. So let's take a look at what this new interface looks like. So today, this is how the Security Hub interface looks like. When you log into Security Hub, you can see all the various different standards, the evaluation of the controls against these standards, and then the security score. We've actually termed this interface as Security Hub CSPM, which is the Cloud Security Posture Management interface now. This interface already allowed you to not only go into the standards, but also look at which were some of the resources, had the most findings by severity. But as you can see, most of these findings today were stateless, which means they were findings that were aggregated from either native detection tools of AWS or from our partner tools. Additionally, Security Hub does provide you that same construct of making sure all these findings can be aggregated across regions, and then what were some of the common threat types and or exploits that we were looking at. From a management standpoint, allowed you to easily go ahead and configure this across either multiple accounts or multiple regions. Starting today, you'll have this option now to go ahead and try the new Security Hub. When you click on this, this will open up and pivot to a new interface, which will have its own dashboard. And this summary dashboard will show you some of the key correlated elements prioritized on where you want to take actions. And how that correlation is happening is where you will see some of the new features. The first one is a threat summary, which is what are some of your most critical threats and the associated resources with that. Second one is an exposure summary, which is how are vulnerabilities and detections and misconfigurations tied together that are leading to an exposure that you should take an action on. And then, as you see in the dashboard here, there will be a security coverage information as well. This is very easy and simple now, where you can easily navigate to the coverage map and look at which of your accounts have detection coverage or have vulnerability protection or have sensitive data protection. So these are basically looking at all of the services that we covered in this session and which of the AWS accounts are covered with those services or protected with those services and which are not. So it gives you an easy view to look at whether these accounts are critical and or where your production resources are, and you can easily enable these features from there as well. And then finally, a resource summary. The resource summary is also very helpful. That helps customers easily look at all their resources. This is a feature where we will continue to build on. So if you're looking at, for example, threats or vulnerabilities across your complete supply chain, you can also look at the various different resources that are there across all the accounts that are covered or where the service is enabled, and then it'll bring in that inventory and provide you that view. Now, if we go back to our summary, in the threat summary, Ryan highlighted earlier in the demo where you were able to see the findings in GuardDuty. You will notice that some of those findings have already also showed up in the threat summary because we're looking at some of the resources that have the highest potential threats here. So by severity, we are able to show you that there is an attack sequence for an EKS compromised cluster, or there's also a finding on the potential data compromise of one or more S3 buckets involving a sequence of actions. These are all the findings and the attack paths that were built or detected by GuardDuty have already made their way in here. In addition to showing that in here, we're also able to relate them to exposures. So if you navigate to the exposures tab, now these are exposure findings, potential security issues in your environment that are generated by correlating different traits. And these traits are something that you can look at more details here as well. These are also easily available by severity. We will actually summarize some of the top attributes, which are the resources or the account IDs, for you to easily identify where that resource is, which account that resource is residing, or potentially what team is leveraging that as well. And from there, if you expand into the finding title, One of the things that we've done is that made those findings very simple and easy in a human-readable format, so you can easily decipher what that finding detail is. For example, here it's highlighting a potential container escape where a container with IAM role privilege has vulnerable container image with known exploit that can be exploited with no user interaction through root user or privilege flag. When we look at the traits here, you can see some of the traits, and you can also find out which service is showing or exhibiting that trait. The traits revolve around assumability or misconfiguration or vulnerability from inspectors detection or sensitive data detection from Macy, as well as network reachability. You can click on any one of these traits or the resources, and then you can also dive further into not only looking at the details of the resources, which one is the primary and the secondary resources, but you can also look at some of the associated traits and go and investigate those. Each one of these traits, whether it's misconfiguration or vulnerability, will define what the issue is. And in the overview path, you can also look at the potential attack path. So in the visual interface, we will show you like what was the primary resource. And if I expand this into full screen, you can actually see that the primary resource is the ECS service, which is where the ECS cluster is. And then some of the associated resources include the EC2 security group, the container repository, and then the task definition, which is where there's an IAM assumed role, and then what actions or policies against those assumed roles are. This is giving me like a very clear indication of the contributing trait, as well as the primary and the secondary resource. So this potential attack path now gives you a clear indication on how these findings are getting correlated. In addition to that, there is remediation information available as well. So we're giving customers now an easy way to look at how they can remediate this potential exposure or this finding, and then each resource detail allows you to dig further deeper into either the primary or the secondary resource and take the appropriate actions. The other information that is available per finding and or grouped across finding is the ability to take actions. Like I mentioned, all of these findings are normalized in open cybersecurity schema framework. However, we do provide you a JSON view for developer purposes or for integration of this through EventBridge into third-party tools. You can actually view the full JSON detail of this, but this JSON is normalized in that OCSF format as well. And then finally, one of the other things I wanted to highlight is the integration aspects. You can actually see here that there's already a ticketing interface where you can actually go and create a ticket, for example, for either Jira or ServiceNow. Once you create the ticket, it can actually also show you the ticket number, which will be reflected in the interface. And then one of the other things which is available now in this interface is not only integrations such as with ticketing tools or downstream automation, but you can also create your own automation rules as well. Security Hub provides you a key value where you can create multiple automations, integrate your runbooks. That's an area that we will continue to improve and enhance on as well. And that's where you can create some of these automation rules as well. One of the examples of this would be creating an automation rule based on finding details, so or a finding type. So if you have high severity findings or findings that have network exposure, you can create an automation rule to go and kick off a policy to prevent this from happening. Or you can create tickets, like for example, high severity tickets, whether they're related to threats or vulnerabilities or exposures, what actions should the security teams take downstream. So these are some of the features that are now built in the service. Again, this is something that's available for all customers under preview. So we will love to have customers try this out, provide us feedback. There is no cost associated with this as part of the Security Hub service. So to summarize, our key value proposition of why customers leverage Security Hub now is to bring in not only the findings, but to also unify all the context associated with security operations, streamline the response and remediation actions that need to be taken. This should also help the productivity of the security tools as we are including that normalized, standardized format of defining what these findings are, what the exposures are, and then correlating that information, which helps you then easily also look at the remediation steps by resource and by attack path, and then go and act on that. This service will continue to evolve towards helping customers with ease of security analytics. That is something that we are focused on, is to provide customers one place to get those security analytics. As you observed from the console experience as well, you're no longer pivoting into multiple tools or multiple interfaces, so our goal is to simplify that in one place. The detection and response portfolio continues to evolve. What you see here are all of the services that we surfaced today, and then some of the other services that belong in this portfolio. As Ryan highlighted, our threat detection and workload protection is primarily focused with Amazon GuardDuty. Our vulnerability management is focused with Amazon Inspector, and then our sensitive data discovery leverages Amazon Macie. All these services are natively integrated with AWS workloads. One of the other key benefits from simplifying security is to ensure there is no log generation or ingest costs associated with any of these services. So when you're enabling these services, you can easily start getting the findings because they automatically ingest the telemetry that's required and then generate the findings. So you're no longer streaming logs or creating logs or making describe calls or API calls, etc. That's the advantage that these native services provide. And with the evolution of Security Hub towards unifying and providing that consolidated view, not only is it acting as your centralized monitoring and cloud security posture management service, it's also acting as correlating and unifying the security detections in one place. We do have other services that you can leverage if you want to investigate further and dive deeper into either helping the security teams aggregate all the logs in one place, which is Amazon Security Lake, that can allow you to create all of the log repositories across multiple different logs, not only AWS, but also non-AWS logs that you want to bring in one place and then investigate or run either queries against them or do forensic analysis and integrate them with your SIM or SOA tools. Again, all in OCSF or normalized format. And then Amazon Detective is something that automatically correlates this information as well, but provides a modal graph view of where and how these API actions are getting acted upon for, again, threat analysts and forensic analysis. And then at re:Invent last year, we had announced a service called AWS Security Incident Response, which is an evolution of the customer incident response service that is available to all of our enterprise support customers that helps customers to easily navigate and create incident response roles and responsibilities where you can leverage human-powered resources from AWS who can actually help you with incident response, and you can easily create tickets for a team of experts in AWS that can help you with navigating through your incident response process as well. So with the combination of these services, we are continuing to help improve customers' detection and response and security outcomes. Thanks for taking the time and coming in. Hopefully you enjoyed the session. Please take the survey. Thank you.